Today we have a 2005 Toyota Corolla with a 1.8 liter engine, and the customer's complaint is that there is an intermittent rough idle, and the issue is that there's only a rough idle, only when idling. Off idle, it drives fine. Now the engine, it sometimes, it momentarily, it cuts out, not completely. So the RPM drops and then it rises back after a few seconds, and you could feel the shudder inside the vehicle and in the steering wheel that the engine is hesitating. And so I already checked everything, such as the fuel pressure and the ignition system, the fuel system. I already checked I checked pretty much absolutely everything in the previous part or video that I did. And so now I'm just having a look at the cam and crank sensors and analyzing the waveforms, because I'm suspecting that there could be an issue with either the crankshaft position sensor and or a cam sensor. However, there are no stored trouble codes at the moment, and there's no information that's available that's stored in the computer. So really, I'm not able to find anything. So as of now, I already hooked up the cam and crank sensors to my lab scope. So I'm just analyzing the waveforms to see if there's any discrepancies or any glitches in the waveforms, and just go from there, because I think there is possibly an issue with that. Now, earlier in previous months or so, I already checked everything. I checked the fuel pressure. I also did a fuel injector drop down test to check the individual fuel injectors, and that passed. I did a compression test. I checked all of the ignition coils and spark plugs. I also analyzed the waveforms of every ignition coil, and everything checked out fine. So I wasn't able to find anything, although I checked the misfire counters in mode 6, and there would be a misfire, probably like 1 or 2 or maybe 3 counts in some of the cylinders, maybe cylinder 1 and 2 for the most part, but it's intermittently, only when the problem happens. When the problem goes away, then there's no more of the misfire counts. I will post the video in which I did my previous diagnostics on the screen somewhere here, and I'll leave the link in the description as well. So I'm just having a look at the service information or service data on what the waveforms should look like. And so it says here, there's the information here on the equipment settings. 5 volt per division and 20 milliseconds per division, either cranking or idling. Now I try to set it up here, but I couldn't set it up exactly on what it says here, because I'm not able to see much on my scope. So I believe I made a mistake here. The cam sensor is actually over here beside the fuel rail, on where the fuel injectors are. I'm having a visual inspection on it right now. So I'm doing a visual inspection on it now, and I think that I could see that, I don't know if it's like it's melted on there or something. I use a screwdriver to poke at it, seeing what's going on. Really hard to show it on camera. So you could see the sensor here on where the bolt is supposed to go. So I just use a screwdriver to poke at it just to see. So I'm just having a look at it. I know that sometimes you can tap on the sensor and see if the idle or the drivability changes on the engine, or if the engine shuts off or something. Sometimes you'll be able to tap it. So I'm probably going to re-scope the cam's sensor only, since I already got the vehicle on the floor already. So I just temporarily unplugged it. There's a a tab here that you're able to push down on to get out the connector. So I'm going to scope this now and see on what the readings are. So I probed the black wire that's over here. It's a 2-pin connector. There's a red one and there's a black one. That's where I'm receiving and getting the the signal. So now I hooked up the crank sensor again, but I'm not too sure if this is the proper connection for the crank sensor. I need to play around with it to get the proper signal. earlier in the video, I connected the wrong sensor, in which I thought it was the cam sensor, but it wasn't. It was something else. I'm not sure on what it is. I would have to look it up. But anyhow, now I'm connected to the cam sensor. This time around, I reconnected back to the crank sensor, and just having a look at the waveforms, it looks like there's just very like minor glitches in the cam sensor waveform, but it's very hard to tell as the issue is not prominent at this moment. Until I can get it to act up, then I'll be able to know. But the issue is, uh, since that it's not happening, I'm not able to duplicate. I'm not able to duplicate the symptom and the issue. But because it's an intermittent issue, usually you would have to call for more diagnostic time. I'd say maybe a minimum of 2 hours. But if the customer understands about the issue and they're okay with it, and then it's fine. But otherwise, you would have to tell the customer to come back when the issue becomes worse, because a lot of times for intermittent problems, unless there's an issue that can really be uh, inspected visually or something, then otherwise you would have to wait until the issue gets worse, uh, because there's no information to work with, so there's not much that you can do. So now I'm just going to conclude my diagnosis here. Uh, I don't know if I should call cam and crank sensors that may or may not fix the problem. Might just tell the customer to wait until it gets worse. In the meantime, I will have a closer look and analyze those waveforms to see if there's any issues with those, and just go from there. So I just connected the cam sensor this way. That's for channel 2 over here, and then channel 1 for the crank sensor. Now usually you can look up a wiring diagram to see which wire is which, but usually I just connect to either wire until I'm able to get a signal and go from there. I tried every single wire, and I'm getting relatively the same signal. There's two wires there, and there's one black wire. I think it's a ground or something. Over here I can see the wiring diagram that's available. You have pins uh, 1 and 2 for the crank sensor, black and white here. So now we are going to check the resistance of the cam sensor. We are going to connect to the two pins here, and it's reading 1.106 kilo ohms. So 1.106 kilo ohms is equivalent to 1,106 ohms. So you multiply it by 1,000. So we are going to check the specifications to see if it's within specifications. So over here it said inspect camshaft position sensor resistance 835 to 14 ohms at cold, 1060 to 1645 ohms at hot. So right now it's cold. This vehicle has been sitting overnight, so it's between 835 and 1400 ohms. So that's okay. it doesn't necessarily mean that the sensor is okay. It just that it just means that the resistance checks out on the sensor. It doesn't really mean that the entire sensor is good. This is just a resistance check. And so now I'm not able to easily check the resistance of the crankshaft position sensor because it's not easily uh, within hand's reach, because I would have to remove the alternator or the intake in order to get in there. So it's a little difficult to get inside. So I can take the connector out and check the resistance of that. So I know that I had trouble trying to get the proper signal for the crank sensor. However, I don't have the time anymore to go and to fiddle around with it, because I'm running out of time now, and also I know that the ECM is inside the underneath the glove box area on the passenger's side, and so I would have to remove a few things in order to get to it, but I'm not going to be doing that today. The vehicle is still it's running and driving fine, so there's not much I can do at the moment. I have not got the approval yet to replace any of the sensors, so we are probably just going to wait until the issue gets worse, because the vehicle still drives relatively fine, and the other day it was not acting up. So we are just going to leave it for the time being. It's been almost a year with this issue and still hasn't completely acted up. It hasn't tripped any codes yet for the check engine light. So we are just going to wait and just leave it for now. Maybe later on, if I do get some extra time, I may be able to scope the crank sensor directly at the computer. It's very difficult to get access to the wiring here on this vehicle. I tried from underneath, and I tried doing it from underneath beside the alternator. It's I'm having a hard time trying to connect to it. So I just wanted to conclude this video. One last thing that I wanted to mention is that if a cam sensor is bad or acting up intermittently, it won't just affect just one, two, or three cylinders. It will affect the entire engine. In this case, this is a 4-cylinder engine. So if a cam sensor or crank sensor is bad, it will affect the entire engine. It's not going to usually affect just one or two or three cylinders. It would affect everything. So, but anyhow, I was just doing this for the sake of making a video and just doing my checks, because I was dealing with an intermittent problem. Now this cam sensor on this Toyota vehicle is a magnetic reluctance sensor, so it produces an AC signal, alternating current, so it produces something similar to a sine wave. So anyhow, I'm going to be showing the screenshots that I took off of my lab scope, in which I think and where I found glitches and or dropouts and discrepancies in the waveforms. So over here in the first one, I circled it in red where there's a double wave or signal here. So this does not look like
it's normal. And then on the next one, I highlighted it at the very bottom, in which the waves, the bottom part of the waveforms were not lined up with each other over here. And on the other one, you can see there's a double sine wave here at the very end. So I don't think that's normal either. I circled that in red. And the one on the left side, there's a little bit of a glitch in the signal, but it's not a huge concern. This does not necessarily mean that the camshaft position sensor is bad or faulty by itself. This could mean that there is something in the engine that is causing this signal to happen. So just because you're seeing glitches or dropouts or discrepancies in the waveforms does not necessarily mean that the sensor itself is bad. It could mean that something is going on in the engine to produce these waveform irregularities. And so, because this issue has been going on for roughly, I think, about a year and 8 months now, until I finally found the problem, which I will show you in the last and final part, in part 3. And so, because of that intermittent problem, I had time to tinker around and check for some things. I kind of knew that I wasn't gonna find anything, but I just decided to do my checks anyways, because I didn't want to throw parts onto this vehicle. And so, because it's our family vehicle, it's not a big issue. I had some time on the side to play around and to see on what's going on. This is not something that I would typically do for a regular customer diagnostic on an intermittent problem like this, unless I could find something obvious in a short amount of time, in which there is something obvious in a visual inspection, by having a look at the parts, or whatever part may look faulty or defective. So I'm going to continue on with the rest of the waveforms here, and you could see just the ones in which I circled in red for the camshaft position sensor. It's a turquoise color, blue color. The yellow one, we are just going to ignore that completely, because I had difficulty trying to obtain a proper signal from the crankshaft position sensor. It would have been extremely helpful to see on what the signal was for the crank sensor, but unfortunately, I didn't have time to play around with it, and I just kind of gave up there, and I left it. So we're just going to focus on the cam sensor instead here in the waveforms. So over here you can see this one. The next one is a lot smaller on the rising edge. You can see it drops down a lot faster than the other ones. The other ones are wider. This one is smaller. So just a little bit of a glitch there. These are just my my findings and research. So I just wanted to show that to you guys, but I know definitely that there is something going on here with this engine. But at this time in which I made the video, I didn't know exactly and what the problem was. And so now at the very end, I just show the known good waveforms, and I put that known good waveform over a waveform that I caught, which was okay when the vehicle was not acting up or having that many issues. So I did a comparison at the very end, and you can see that it lines up pretty much perfectly with the known good versus the one that that I took. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please don't forget to give it a like, and please consider subscribing to my channel if you're not already a subscriber. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good day and take care. Please stay tuned for part 3, which will be the last and final part of this series. I will be revealing as to what originally happened and the cause of the intermittent misfire.